Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Ground Chuck, Charlie's Coaching Corner. And really excited tonight. We're going to have a couple of surprises, but we're going to have a lot of fun as we always do. And Coach, thank you again for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael.
So, Coach, let me ask you, when you first started doing Pop Warner, was that the first year that Pop Warner came into existence for Derby?
Yes, we were in. There was Nick Santor, Mr. Piccolo. I'm trying to think who else, but they were the ones that got it. There were half a dozen guys that got it together, and they had approached Fran Cirillo to be the head coach, and Fran knew I was going to Fairfield U and asked me if I could help as well, which I did. So that was the very first year. It was very a lot of learning to go on. I'll never forget the first time we had a weigh-in, and we didn't realize that when you go to get weighed in, they just set the scale. I can't remember what the weight was back then. I think it was 115, 120 pounds. And they set it at that. And we were worried about kids that didn't weigh enough to play. But
Right.
it worked out pretty well, yeah.
And let me ask you, was it just like midgets and junior midgets? I mean, was it a slow process before they added all these other?
Oh, yeah. The first year it was
Yeah.
just midgets. I mean, we didn't even have the junior midget team. It was just one team. And everything went from that. And then slowly they began adding. And honestly, I think they went a little too far, but that's another whole story.
Right. So what was like the first year like for you? I mean, would you say though that helped a lot in uh, how you would coach down the road? I mean, was that first year a good learning experience for you?
Oh, absolutely. No, I only played the 3 years of high school ball. I always loved the game, and I studied it, but only what we were doing at Derby High School at the time. I didn't know enough. I didn't know a variety of offenses or defenses or whatever. I just knew the one. We're a 50 defense team under Mr. Carbone, and I knew that. We ran some I, so I knew that. But once you got involved and started to scheme things up and started to work with the kids on the field, quickly you started to learn different things, especially how to deal with the kids. Some of them, weren't ready yet to play Pop Warner football. They were a little intimidated. John Pagliaro, for one. I mean, ironically, the first time John came out, he was a very, very quiet kid. But right away you saw he had abilities, but he wasn't really ready for the contact yet. So we put in some drills to get him banged around a little bit with dummies and stuff like that. And of course, you know how successful John was in his career.
Right. And Pop Warner back then too, Coach. They did a lot of emphasis on hitting because it's different at the high school level. You can only hit so much in practice. You can't get people hurt. But in Pop Warner, they didn't always, they showed them an offense and defense, obviously, but a lot of it was technique. A lot of it was hitting, things like that. It was really like giving the kids a good introduction.
Well, it was because, again, the boys had never played before, and here we were trying to get them, physically ready for the game. Because, as I said, some of the kids were a little intimidated by the the physical aspect of the game. But
Right.
they worked hard. They were very willing to listen to the coaches, to do what we were asking them to do. We had a nice group of kids, and that first year was very, very successful.
Right. And Coach, we got a guest all the way from Scotland. He's decided
Here
to
he
join the
is.
show tonight and really happy to have him here. And that, of course, was your former captain on the 1986 team, Mr. Walt Deforest. So, Walt, thank you for joining us for a few minutes tonight.
Hey, thanks. I don't know if I have a good connection or not. Is that
No, we can
okay?
hear you fine. Yep, we can hear you. So, Walt,
Oh,
how
good.
long has it been since you've seen Coach, honestly?
No idea. In the 90s, late 90s, maybe.
I would think, yeah. I'd have to say,
Right.
well, I wouldn't
Long
recognize
time.
you.
Good to see you.
That's quite the beard.
Yeah,
You're
yeah, I
looking
got a
good.
little facial hair now.
You're
Yeah,
looking
yeah,
good.
the beard suits well.
Right.
Thanks.
So,
You
yeah.
guys look great.
So Walt, let me ask you, talk to me about those years you played Derby football for Coach DeCenzo, because I believe when you were a freshman in high school, that was his first year of coaching the varsity, correct? I think so, right?
Yeah, possibly. But yeah, my freshman year was 1983. 80,
Right. And that,
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
yeah.
So, so I mean, you
But
as a
yeah, I mean, like
sophomore,
Coach DeCenzo.
yeah. So
Oh,
sophomore
I was
year for
saying
you
Coach
was,
DeCenzo has.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah. So sophomore year for you and your fellow classmates was actually, you know, good for you guys because you knew coach was staying. You weren't going to have to go 1 year with one coach and then go a couple years with another one. You knew you were going to have Coach DeCenzo. So just talk to me about like what sophomore year was like for you guys, being on the being a part of Derby football and playing for Coach DeCenzo.
I mean, look, the history of Derby football for any child growing up was quite special and uh, overwhelming in a sense that like you get to wear the jersey, you get to wear the jersey. And then when you look at the history, like I remember one time I was looking at the history of Derby football, and it's like Charlie DeCenzo blocks a field goal in the Shelton game or something like that. Was it a punt or
Yeah.
something? Like the history of just never quitting. We were a small team. I just heard you guys talking about Pop Warner, and that was a great starting point for all of us.
Right. And
So
let me
like
ask
having
you,
Charlie, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. You could continue. Go ahead. You had talked about
Oh yeah,
having
just
Charlie.
I don't know, like yeah, having Charlie as a coach was a new beginning. Obviously, because I haven't even thought about DeFlippo. I'm not because I didn't realize. Now I'm like, oh, it was DeFlippo, which had this aura of massive. Everyone loved him, and so Charlie stepping in. I'm sure that I've never seen. Um, I don't know. I just think having Charlie there with his history of Derby was the perfect person to be there.
Right. And Walt, or Coach, I'll ask you this question. A lot of these kids played 2 years for you. I mean, like they were 2 year starters. I think Walt was as well. Just talk about the impact they had because I mean, having these kids playing 2 straight years of varsity, it really helped them for their senior season.
Oh, definitely. You always try to get that continuity on your team. You'd love to have kids that could step in and play a couple of years. The first year for everybody is a little tough. You're trying to, they're learning too, but as they gain that experience, then they become a much better ball player. And anytime you can get a kid that can play two, we're lucky enough occasionally to get a 3-year starter. That really puts a foundation on your team that you can build around those kids. Walt was a defensive end and an tight end, and if I'm not mistaken, Walt, you played with a broken hand there for a while, didn't you?
Yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, and I mean, no, that was always beneficial. And the other thing we always worried about is the sequence. Try to have kids backing up a kid like Walt. Walt's here for 2 years now. Walt's going to graduate. You got to have somebody ready to step in behind him. And so that helped build the continuity of the program as well.
Right.
I'm remembering things as we're talking. And like I wasn't a 2-year guy. Like the depth was too good. Well, my junior year, like I played a little bit, but what made us really strong, and I think Charlie might remember this. This was really strange. I never seen this before. But the practice squad,
Yeah.
we had Jamie Ritter, me, and we would all get pumped up, and we were the scrubs. We weren't even good enough, you know what I mean? And we would mess up the first team so bad. Charlie would be yelling at everybody, yeah, you know, and we would be like, yeah, and like practice. We would just destroy the first team. I'm serious. I would block punts every time we did punts. I would block the punts, and you know, we were just adamant about really,
Yeah.
you know. So by the time Saturday came, the first team was ready. But it's because I believe of the junior varsity team. We were undefeated like 2 years in a row. Like, I think we lost one game in 2 years. And the junior varsity was a great way to learn, you know.
No, Walt makes a very good point. You know, when you have a junior varsity team or your second string team, and they're willing to compete every day, even though, you know, their playing time might not be as much as the other guys, that definitely makes your team better. And that's one of the problems, I think, with some of the teams that we see more recently, where they don't have that depth. And therefore, in practice, it's hard to get a good look. You know, when you're trying to get a good look at the other team's offense and defense, it's advantageage to have good kids over there, maybe not ready to play varsity yet, but good kids that are working hard. I'll never forget, like a lot of our kids, like Jimmy Lewis, we were talking about him last week, and John Pegliero. John Pegliero never played defense, but yet when we ran second string offense against the varsity defense, he always jumped in there, and that made our defensive kids all the better for that. And it was the same thing with Jimmy Lewis. Jimmy Lewis did the same thing as well. But Walt makes a very good point there. It's that group of kids that, you know, we used to call them program kids. We had kids that would sophomore year, they struggled a little bit. Junior year, they're getting ready, they're playing a little bit. But by the time they're seniors, they've mastered those skills. And that's what we were hoping to do, you know, just bring them up, develop them in the program so that when their turn came, they were ready to go.
Right. And Walt, I think one of the things about the scout team where you said, you know, you guys gave them a great look, the coaching staff definitely recognized the efforts that you and the other guys on the scouting team gave because senior year you were elected as one of the captains. So I mean that was their way of saying thank you for the hard work you put in that year to help that team be successful. Just talk about the feeling you had when you were told you were one of the four captains that year.
It was strange, you know, because you know, I tried to do my part, you know, like teamwork, you know, thinking about derby football and all of, you know, the lessons you learn from teamwork. You know, it's you got to work when nobody's looking, you know, all of those things, you know, and yeah, there's a lot of great players, and everybody wanted to be on the field, you know, and only you do you do learn from being on the field. You know, you could practice and practice and practice, but until you're out there alone, that's the only time you're going to learn. And uh, it was great to have these guys vote me in as captain. So a part of my didn't believe it, you know, but you know, I work hard all the time, so it was a nice thing uh, to have that, and it was four of us. I don't know if that's ever happened before, but it was four of
Yeah.
us, so it was nice.
And Walt, the other thing is too, your class, Coach DeCenzo had had success. They won a Class S title, but your class was his first Housatonic League championship, which to me was always the first goal in Derby. So just talk about how special that was for both of you, Coach and Walt, winning that first Hoosie in '86.
Well, yeah, I didn't realize that was the first Hoosie. Yeah, so especially because it was supposed to be a rebuilding year or whatever, like we lost some people, and like I said, it was my first year. I wasn't a second year player, and there was a lot of guys. And I was the other thing is I was small, you know, like I was tall, but I was 100 and
And
I think 70 pounds. And but it's all about technique, you know. So we had a good group of guys. Like we beat Cheshire on the goal line. They had 300-pound linemen. What the heck? How does that happen? But yeah, it's these guys coming together, um, and all the work. Uh, it felt good to look back and have those. I was telling my friend today about, because I don't think about it too much, but we won 10 games in a row, and that was quite special. And we won the championship for the Hoosie. And then, of course, we had the game in Shelton with the Storm, and then the state championship. But yeah, to be a part of Derby and then be a captain, I don't think about that much. Yeah, it's quite special, and with all of the history. So yeah, I don't think about that. I forgot about that. I forgot I was captain. So long ago.
Right. And coach, what was it like for you to have that first Whoosy and with that group of kids? Because they were really your first, in a lot of ways, your first full group. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, coming from Coach DeFlippo, our goal was always to win the Whoosy. That was the first goal. And again, when we first started, we didn't even have the playoffs. Then the playoffs came in. But even when they came in, our goal was always win the Whoosy first. Win the Whoosy. That's our goal coming in. And then if you do that, well, maybe some other good things will happen along the way. Uh, Being the first Whoosy championship, it was great. I mean, these were the kids that came in with me. We developed them. As Walt says, going into the year, as we talked about last week, we weren't picked as the favorites by any means. And the kids pulled together. They kept themselves focused, and they had a great season. It was very worthwhile, very comforting to win that first league championship, because you're following a guy like Lou. I mean, you want to keep the program at the same level. You don't want to compare yourself to him by any means, but you want to keep the program at that same level of respect throughout the state.
Right, right. So, well, I know it's almost midnight where you are. I don't want to keep you on
Oh,
too long, but
no
what
worries.
would you say to coach this before you go? What would you say to Coach DeCenzo about those years at Derby? What they meant to you, and what the impact they would have on you later in life?
I would say, like I touched on it before. Uh, it was the constant. I don't know, it was just the constant work. You had the gyms. People playing other sports, I think, is important as well. Sometimes people want to focus on only one, but I think when you're athletic and you're doing different things, that you're a stronger human athlete. So there was we had many athletes who were playing more than one sport, and so I played basketball, track, football, and it it was, I think, I heard you guys say Pop Warner before too. It's like the group of guys that we had, we were together for years.
Yeah.
And then with Coach and the program of Derby, everything's a question every year, so we never know what the season's going to be. But I think we all knew that anyway, because every game you go out there, you never know. And we would just win and win and win by fighting to the last nails, the cardiac kids, some people used to call us. And we never quit. And it was everybody, the coaches, all the way down, the fans, and then your brother was Carmen. He was all, the community was good. And Charlie's guidance, really, because you get these athletes and then you have to guide them, so the guidance there, and Coach Allo, and it's been years since I've had any kind of conversations. So I'm trying to remember it all. Like, I didn't like the word DeFlippo. I was like, oh my God, Coach DeFlippo, the legend, And now we have DeCenzo, the legend, And it's like, it's through the work. You're working with legends, but we don't know it yet, And it comes through the work, and it's good to think about. I haven't thought about it in such a long time. It's nice to remember there's the trials and tribulations of Derby football, the work, and yeah, it brings a smile. So thanks, Charlie.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, Walt, I want to thank you for giving us a few minutes today. That was really nice of you to come on. Again, people don't realize, but it's almost midnight where Walt is. He's in Scotland, and it was very thoughtful and generous of you to come
Yes.
on today. So thank you for doing that.
Oh no, it was great because I was up. I just did a show. I perform, and so I got to perform. Somebody booked me, and I do performances for people around the world. That the around the world performing. Um, Sometimes I travel, but during COVID in 2020, I started to do my performance on Zoom, and so I did thousands and thousands of performances, and I met people from all around the world, which I do, because you travel. But I just did a show tonight, which was fantastic for these people. They already booked me once, then they booked me again because it was a birthday present for their mother. And it was a wonderful thing to be able to have people pay you to give you uh, 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 your work, and the tenacity and stuff that I have is, because I think I grew up in Derby, and I had to fight. I had to fight for. I was skinny and small. Listen, I was really, really skinny. As a freshman, I think I was 118 pounds, or unbelievable. I didn't like fill out until I graduated. Like I graduated, and I went, and I got big. Oh my god! But all that hard work is in there, and it's nice to really talk about. And so it's no problem. I really like watching. I was catching up with your show, and it's nice to see. So thanks a lot, and I'll keep running through. I was watching one of your interviews with some woman. I was just looking at it tonight, and she was an actress. It's from a couple of weeks ago, but it's great what you're doing. Because it
I
gives me a
appreciate it.
chance. Yeah, it gives me a chance to plug back in because sometimes we get lost in life. And
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
nice to look back and say thanks and see you guys. And I appreciate your time and what you're doing, Mike.
Well, thank you, Walt. And I told you it would mean a lot to Coach. I know it does. And thank you again
Thanks.
for giving us a few minutes. It was really kind of you to do.
Well, it
Yeah,
was
thanks.
great seeing
Thank you
you.
very much,
Take
and
care
have
of
a great
yourself,
night.
buddy.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Cheers. Thanks.
Thank you, Walt. And of course, that was Walt Deforest, Charlie's captain in 1986. And Coach, I'll tell you, I didn't recognize him either till
Holy cow.
it-
Would not
yeah,
have recognized him at all.
right. But Coach, it's stuff like that, listening to Walt, and he hadn't thought about it in years, and then he's
Yeah.
going back to it all. And it's all kind of coming back to him as he's talking to you. And that's really like, I think what you as a coach is very rewarding is when these kids who are now adults, and he just told you how he's performed and he's traveled all over the world. I
Yeah.
mean, you get to really see what they've become as adults, and that's got to make you proud.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, some of the kids, most of the kids have done remarkably well, and to watch them mature, have a family of their own, create careers for themselves. It's wonderful to see. It really is.
Right. So, Coach, we were talking a little bit about Pop Warner. Now, were you a head coach that first year, or did you kind of just help out? Like,
No, Fran Cirillo was the head coach. I was an assistant. I coached the line a lot. Pete Montini and Sonny Chiaretti and Richie Valeria. That was the
yeah,
coaching staff we had, and we worked very well. And Fran was the director, and he knew what kind of offense he wanted and everything, and uh, organized it, and gave each of us a little responsibility to take care of during the course of the week. And I can't remember, we used to practice 2-3 times a week and then play on Sundays, I think.
right. And Coach, I mean, obviously, that first year played a big part because you would go on to coach as, 50 some odd years. So, I mean, really, you had to have had the the love for it right away because I mean you continued to do it forever. And coach, I know you became the head coach in '83, but I don't even think you ever thought about being a head coach. That kind of happened really in a lot of ways by accident. Lou had quit. You never had thought Lou was going to quit anytime soon. So really, like you just loved coaching. It didn't matter if you were an assistant or a head coach. You just loved being there.
No, absolutely. I think we talked about this once before, but when Coach said he was resigning, none of us expected it. We were just shocked, and we thought Coach was going to coach forever, and so when that moment came, the opportunity arose, but it was a little intimidating, to follow a guy like Lou, to say the least.
Right. And coach, I think about Pop Warner, and I always say, for years when I would talk to people from Ansonia, they would always say it starts with Pop Warner. And I feel like that was the same thing with Derby because it makes your job a lot easier, coach, when they're coming up and they know how to form tackle, they know how to form block, they know how to do the basics because it's really hard to have a practice and you got to teach them everything like that.
No, there's no question. The Pop Warner program in Derby was the foundation to the program. And again, we emphasized the freshman program and the JV program. We felt they were all stepping stones. And again, we were looking at being a small school. We were looking at developing the kids. We didn't have 100 kids come out for football. We had 35, 40. And
Right.
You had to develop those kids, and as I said, you had to make sure you always had backups. Like we didn't want to go into my first year was tough because that the previous lose last year we were in the state championship game against Ansonia. Unfortunately, we lost, but we graduated a ton of kids that year. So my first year, like the offensive line, I think there was one kid that had played before. So we had a ways to go, and no matter how hard you try, you're always going to have some down periods, where maybe you don't have the best running back or running back similar to one you had the year before, or maybe your quarterback isn't quite the quarterback that you're used to. So it takes a while, and you've got to just keep after it. People say, you get beat. What do you do when you go back to work? There's no mystery to it. I mean, there's no magic powder that you sprinkle on the kids Friday night and then play a great game on Saturday. You just go back to work and you just keep working at their skills and emphasizing what they can do. And then as a coaching staff, you have to make a decision. What can the kids do?
Right.
I was never one to say, well, this is my system and the kids have to fit into my system. It was more the other way around. I would try to look at what the kids can do and then maybe adjust my system or what I wanted to do to their skills.
Right. Well, coach, I got a couple of surprises right here. Number one, this one you're going to enjoy a lot. There's two of them, and you see one of them right there, and then we got another one coming on as well. You see him diving into the end zone. So I'm going to add them right now to the show. And it's my privilege to introduce Charlie's 1990, two of his key members of the '90 state championship team, John Anroman and Jason Palmieri. And coach, you got both your running backs back in the backfield.
There we
today.
go.
So, guys, thank you for coming on today. And Jason, I want to start with you. Number one, just talk to me about Derby football and how it impacted you.
Can you hear me?
We
Yes,
got
I can
you.
hear you fine. Yep.
What's up, Coach? How are you, buddy?
Good. How are you?
Good to see
You're
you.
looking good.
Happy New Year, Mike. You too. Good to
You
see you.
too.
Thank you, buddy.
Yeah. So, what's up, Rome's? Good to see you, brother.
Same here, man. Happy New Year, everybody.
I was
You
just
too,
with
Johnny.
I was with Johnny last weekend. Dave got married last weekend. So
I saw that.
brother.
Congratulations to David and Jen.
Yes, absolutely.
So I just lost the picture here. Can you guys still hear me or?
We can see you.
Yeah, what I did was, Jay, I put you up solo, so like we could see you. Yeah.
How could you miss this big head?
But Jay, I wanted to ask you, like, first off, how how impactful was Derby football for you? Because I mean, forget about the state championship for a second. Just the years of, I think you started out playing Pop Warner for like Ernie Cirillo, and then, you continued to play it throughout your grammar school and high school career. Just talk about what putting that red jersey on meant to you.
Oh, it meant everything. I mean, still to this day, still carrying that pride, every day as we get up to just to go to work. But having all the peers and the older kids that we looked up to, you wanted to be just like them. Running into the end zone or making a tackle. You learned real quick the hard work that they had they put in and that we had to put in. And like I said, I've carried that every day through my life. I didn't end up going to college, just went to work. Kind of like Johnny, and I think we just put our nose to the grind from 1990 forward. Really, just learning, using those those tricks that were taught to us by the guys. Just hard work's going to get you somewhere in life, and nobody can take that away from you. That's for sure.
Right. And John, I mean, you and your brother Dave, and obviously your father too. I mean, put on that Derby jersey. You played, so well for so many years. And it's funny, the Seymour coach, former Seymour coach Paul Sponheimer always jokes how the Anromans just ruined a few of his Christmases. So just talk about how impactful Derby football was for you as well.
I mean, to piggyback off what Jay said, growing up there, starting in Pop Warner at a young age, I was always excited to go to a Derby football game, a high school game. And that's where you kind of got that itch. Back then we didn't win a lot in Pop Warner, and you created bonds with everybody. And we've all became really close, and we're all still close to this day. Obviously, with my father and my brother, we knew what we wanted, and my father pushed us, and that was great, and we needed that, as we all know.
Right. So
But
Charlie, let me ask you, yeah,
go ahead.
Coach, let me ask you this. How, I'm trying to think of the right word, but how, what feeling is it like to know you have two running backs like this, two explosive backs who could do so many things for you? They could block, they could run, they could receive. I mean, it has to make your job, it's always hard preparing for teams, but it has to make your job a lot easier when you could give the ball to both number 26 and 48.
No question. And it's before we go any further, we have to make a point though. Mr. Anroman was never on our staff, but he was on our staff.
Yeah.
He did a great job getting the kids in shape before the season ever started, before we ever started captain's practice and all of that stuff. Mr. Anroman, he took good care of them. But getting back to the two boys in front of you, the two men now. Listen, going into a game, you never knew. You anticipated certain things, but you never knew how it was going to work out. In other words, in some game, we'd say, oh, yeah, we're going to hand the ball to Johnny, and he's going to take care of this. But then they shift their defense and take that away a little bit. And now all of a sudden, Jay's wide open. And in other games, just the opposite. People came in and said, okay, we're going to stuff from tackle to tackle, and Johnny would take it out. It was like the old Army thing, Mr. Inside and Outside. Here they are. But both of them had such skills. I mean, as you said, they were great pass receivers. They both played defense. They both ran hard. They both had good speed. It was just a great balance between the two of them. And the thing that Mike, I think I've talked to you about this before too. There was never once a symbol of envy between the two guys. They never once said to me, Coach, I'm not getting the ball enough, Coach. Never. They just wanted to win. And they were willing to sacrifice. There were times, and I know there were times one kid got the ball maybe 20 times, one kid got the ball 10. Never heard a word. Never heard a word. And they were just willing to do what they had to do to win. In our offense, as you mentioned, Jason blocked for Johnny, but Johnny had a block for Jason too. That's the way the offense worked. it wasn't that old style I formation where the fullback was just a blocker and the tailback got the ball all the time. With our offense, both guys had to block, both guys had to carry the ball, and both guys were pass receivers. And they mastered all three elements of it.
Right. And guys, the 35th anniversary is going to come up in the fall this year. And I'm going to have you guys back on to talk about that whole season. But what I want to focus on is three games that stand out to me that were important in your season. I want to start with the North Haven game because, I mean, just the fact that you guys got on that bus okay was a miracle. But, I mean, there's a funny story about the overtime game, which we'll get to. But Jay, talk to me about that North Haven game. And I mean, I felt like that was a really key victory that just you guys took off after that game as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a pretty intense game when we even got there. They were trying to throw the intimidation factor on us. They thought that was their year. I want to say they had two, Coach or Johnny, correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say 2 or 3 players that went on to play Division I.
Absolutely.
They had some big boys, and we knew that we had that. That there was probably then a 20-year streak at that point, maybe going in
25, yeah,
25 years, and it was a packed house. I remember they had a crew running around the field and coming even on our side. They were like trying to start fights. But we stayed focused on the field and we did what we had. That was an all-around great game, I think. Running the ball, throwing the ball. Ezzo came up big at the end. Me and Johnny had a couple nice runs. I actually think I had a nice catch on our sideline. But, we just stay focused. I mean, that was our thing was we always had, it wasn't, and, you just got us two on here right now, and Coach will, he'll tell you, our team was just loaded with talent. We really were. Anybody would have, taken the ball at any point, at any game. And never would have turned that down. They would have stepped up for us, and everybody did. It was a dream season, and that was a great game. That was definitely one of the bigger games, that's for sure.
Yep.
Right. And John, one of the things about that game is the defense. Rob Hyder made a good point one time when I had him on that a lot of times you guys would bend, but you would never break. And the defense that night, I mean, North Haven had a great offense and they moved the ball on you guys. They got a touchdown. And again, they got some big plays down the stretch, but that defense never gave up the big play. And that was really what that 90 team was, is no matter what adversity they faced, they always, found a way to grind it out and win. So talk about that defensive performance that night.
I think that night or any night, we were determined. We were hungry, and we were a unit. You can rely on your neighbor, so to say. We always pushed each other. We always communicated, and I think a lot of times that will to win takes over, whether it be on offense, defense, pushing each other, or even just from the coaches. I think we were a true family, and it showed on offense and on defense. We weren't the biggest. That team was twice our size. Having that mystique of 25 years does put pressure on you. I mean, we felt it, and we knew the year before when they came in 8-0 and we beat them in Derby, we knew we had our hands full. Going into it, you don't realize the size of it until you're actually in it. And I commend every one of our players that day sticking together and really working as a team to beat them.
Right. Now, Coach, I'm going to ask you about this, but John and Jason, you both could comment on this because it's a funny story. But talk about the overtime because, Coach, your team thought it was like the NFL. They thought if the team scored
I'll never
first,
forget it.
that was it. Yeah.
We're going to overtime. We bring the kids to the sideline, and the captains were there. And I said, "Listen, if we win the toss, we're going on defense." And the kids are on the coach, you're gonna blow the game. What do you go? I said, guys. If we win the toss, we're going on defense. And finally I grabbed Chevy by the chest. Chevy, you're the only one that talks. if we win the toss, we go on defense. And sure enough, we went on defense because it wasn't sudden death. The kids thought it was like the NFL, where if they scored first, they win. But that wasn't the way it was. And I want to get back to the guys were talking about the play. One play that might be overlooked here, but I never overlook it. They had the ball. If we go into the overtime, they had the ball. And I think it was at their third down play. They threw a pass. And from the sideline, I said, oh, no. And Johnny came out of nowhere and knocked the ball down. And that was the big turning point of that game, because then they kicked the field goal, and for 30 seconds, they thought they had the game won. I think some of the fans even thought the game was over, just like some of the kids did.
Fans started playing. Yeah.
But that was the key. That was really the key in that overtime period. That pass knockdown.
Right. And Jay, you guys thought when they kicked the field goal, you had lost, right? You just really didn't understand that whole concept of what this overtime was, or did you have an idea you'd get the ball back?
I remember we had before we had that toss, like Coach was saying, he was saying that we're gonna take defense first, and we're all rattled, saying, why would we ever do that? And then it was explained to us. The refs came over. Everybody explained the rules at that point because we didn't understand it. Then we go in. I mean, we went into two other overtimes later on that year, I think, too. Or
yes, yeah, we did.
Yeah.
I mean, we at first we were a little rattled, and then we knew once we get on offense, we knew in the red zone we're going to punch it in somehow, some way. So, and it was the first play to Ez, I believe, right?
Yeah, first time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I said to Joe Martin, I said, Joe, you're either going to throw this to Ez or you're throwing it into the stands. There is no chance here of an interception. You hear me? It's first down. Yes, Coach.
Yeah.
Now, another game, guys, and you might think this game wasn't important, but it was important for a couple of reasons. One, it's a lesson for the coaching staff that you never take a team lightly and you never make practice easy because you're playing a team with no wins. And number two, even though it wasn't the best game you guys played, you guys still came out with a 21-7 victory. And that was the East Haven game because that game was a little scary. I mean, you guys had Ansonia the following week. You just beat Cheshire. So I think that was like the one game all season where I don't want to say the team took a night off, but the team didn't think it was going to be as tough as it was.
Yeah.
And anybody could talk here, whoever wants to go.
It was definitely a sloppy game for sure.
It was. I'd like to key in on that one. It was definitely a sloppy game. However, offensively, I think we lit it up, but just didn't punch the ball in.
Right.
I fumbled in the going in once. I think somebody else did as well. We should have probably put 35 points on the board, but we won the game, right? So it's 21-7. I think was the final.
That's it. Yep.
You could hear a drop on the bus on the way home, Neach. I swear to God, like we were all fired up. Here we go. We're what was our record at that point, Coach? I don't remember.
Had to be 5 or 6 at least. Right?
Yeah.
6 or 7 wins.
And we're all fired up. We're like, yeah, we're going back. We're 6-0. We're all fired up. Coach turns around. He says, shut the hell up. I don't want to hear a word on the way home. And you could hear a pin drop the whole rest of the way. And we just won the game.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And Coach, let me ask you, you kind of took it easy on them in practice
I did.
this week, right? Yeah.
I did.
John D always jokes about that.
Yeah.
But,
no, we had just come through 5 tough games. I mean, you're playing quality teams. The kids are banged up a little bit. You're going into a game where, odds are you're going to win the game. So we shortened practice a little bit. We laid off some of our harder drills and stuff just to try to get their legs back under them a little bit. And I think, part of it came from us. I think maybe we took our foot off the gas pedal a little bit, and that sprinkled down to the kids a little bit. And it's not that they didn't play hard. They certainly did. As Jay said, we moved the ball up and down the field. We just didn't complete things. Our execution wasn't as good. We weren't as sharp as normal. And, looking at it from a coach's point of view, I kind of put a little of that blame on myself, saying, it could very well have been that all week we gave the kids the impression that this was going to be a little bit too easy, it was frustrating. It really was.
Right. So now, you guys get the win though, and now you're eight, and I mean, you beat Ansonia and Amity and Sheehan. Now you're 8-0, and you go into a game where, again, I thought as a Derby fan this was going to be an easy game, but Lyman Hall had a tradition where Derby was their big game. I mean, they had a whole week of beat Derby week and things like that. And I want to start with this because John, every time I look at this photo, I say to myself, how you didn't break your neck. I mean, you were the master of doing the 360 flip to score a touchdown. But just let me ask you, did you ever hurt your neck on any one of those?
I never did. No, you got to learn how to land, which is on the shoulder, not the head.
Right. But talk about that game a little bit, guys. And coach, you could piggyback with this as well. This was really the first time. I know you guys were down to Ansonia 7-6 at the half, but this was really the first time I felt like this team faced strong adversity because this was a team that wasn't expected to beat you. And I think you guys were behind at the half, if I'm
Yeah.
correct. So I remember a lot of Derby fans, they were thinking the worst, but you guys really came out in that second half and it was a dogfight back and forth. But the fact that you guys came out with that victory that night, it just said what that 90 team was all about. They knew how to win. So just talk about that a little bit.
Go ahead. Who wants it?
You got it, Johnny.
I mean, I feel like you were talking about us being their rivalry. I felt it was every week. I didn't feel there was a team that didn't step up to play us. I think I felt at halftime or even going into the third quarter because they were driving on us on their first drive. I was just like, man, here we go. When do you get a break? When does it slow down a little bit? It was constant. You had to be on your P's and Q's. There was nothing easy that year, ever. Not one game, not one half. Even just talking about East Haven. But Lyman Hall came to play, and they wanted that game. We had some injuries. I think Joe got hurt that game. I think Patty Mack might have got hurt that game. We had a couple injuries, so it kind of rattled us a little bit. But again, like you said, we never broke, and we stayed together. And the kids are hungry. Our team was hungry.
Right. And Jay, it was the win was special, but you had a milestone that night. You got your 1,000th yard, you became a 1,000-yard rusher. And that had to be special for you because you're on a short list of Derby running backs who have done that. So I'm sure at the time you couldn't enjoy it because you're trying to win the game. But after everything calmed down, I mean, did you kind of take it in a little bit that you were a 1,000-yard rusher?
Yeah, I don't even think we really knew at that point. I mean, we weren't like charting yardage or anything. It was just, you try to get through a battle like that. I think later on that week, I figured it out after the newspaper came out, the old Evening Sentinel put something out. But we just, like Johnny was saying, we just kept grinding out every week, and we were playing as a team. It wasn't, the individual stats were never really important. I mean, there's so many individual stats on that team that will blow people's minds that a lot of people don't even realize. And we never put that out there. It was always, we were looking for the end run, and we wanted that ring. We wanted a Derby State Championship, which is what we dreamed about, playing on the sideline, watching the older guys. Yeah, it's great to, be in the 1,000-yard marker with those other guys, but you never really were thinking about it. And I will say to Johnny's point, that's I got a lot of Ansonia friends that I live with up here in Beacon Falls, and they'll probably watch this podcast. That was the difference between the MVL and the Housatonic. And I'll say it right here on the podcast. We were battling every week. Fantastic teams. I'm not taking away anything from what Ansonia's done, but we had a battle on our hands every week. Everybody was coming at us, man. And we're good quality teams too, with good quality coaches, good quality players, and that was just one heck of a year and one heck of a schedule.
Right. And coach, I think about this game where East Haven, obviously they played sloppy. Maybe they took them a little lightly. This Lyman Hall game, I never looked at it that way. I just felt like Lyman Hall came out ready to play. And the true point and the measure of your team was they found the way to get the win. They came back because they were down. And then in that overtime, you guys pull it out. And how funny is it that Scott Ezzo's the hero in both overtime games because he gets the
Right.
interception? But
Yeah.
that's what that team was. And I really felt like that Lyman Hall game was when you guys became state champions because after you won that game, you guys felt in your hearts that nothing was going to stop you.
They certainly did come to play that night, and they were ripping us. I mean, their offense was in high gear that night. Like Johnny said, every time we turned around, they were picking up first down, and they were controlling the ball a little bit. And we had a few kids banged up and stuff, but that's no excuse. We just had to execute ourselves. And credit to the kids, they buckled down in halftime, understood what they had to do, and they came out in the second half. And then, of course, we go into the overtime period again, and Scott makes the nice interception. We went right in and scored, I think, and then Scott made the interception to put the game on ice. But it was a battle, no question about it.
Right. So, guys, before you go, just talk to me. I mean, the state title was great, but I mean, again, what was the feeling like just being a part of this program, the 4 years you were, and the contributions that you both made? Jason, I think you led the Valley in rushing that year, and John, you certainly led the Valley in touchdowns that year. So, I mean, individually, I know it was a team thing, but to have those type of accolades to your resume, you guys had to be very proud, and it all goes back to just Pop Warner and the hard work of high school football and dedicating yourself. So, just tell me what Derby football meant to you.
Go ahead, brother.
I mean, back then it was your life. That's what you grew up. That's what you wanted to do. That's where you wanted to play. I felt after the state championship game, it was more of a relief, and it was more of like, wow, it's over. You work so hard, you play so many games, you play so many years. Back then you played 9 years. I think it was 5 years in Pop Warner, 4 years in high school. And it was the friendships that you make, which we still all talk today, and the laughs, the tears, and the excitement. And I think it was there was an article in the paper after we won that, and it said it was a great day in Derby. And that's exactly how I could sum it up. It was just a great all around family win year, really.
Yeah.
Right. And Jason, I mean, what did it mean to you? I mean, you'd been with that program for so long and, there were ups and downs. I mean, that junior season, I think you guys felt like you could compete for a state title and it just didn't work out. But senior year, there were a couple writers that had you guys going 6-4 and you found a way to win. But coach said it one time when I interviewed him, it really was a team year that year where everybody came together as a team and they picked each other up when, something went wrong. They were always there to pick each other up.
Yeah, I mean, it was really no feeling like that. I mean, you wish you could take that feeling back again, Mike. It was just all the hard work from through Pop Warner. 5 or 6 years of Pop Warner we played. I think we won probably 6 or 7 games in 5 years. You come into Derby High School, it's a whole different realm. I think our freshman year, John, correct me, I think we went like 9-1 our freshman year.
Yeah.
Our year, both of us played with Anderson and Mule, Bernie, and Angeletti. We got on the field with those guys. Our junior year was definitely a little bit of a disappointment with Grutt and Hunter, God rest his soul. But when we won that game, it was for all those guys. It was for all the hard work that we put in, all the coaches that stood behind us. Mr. Anroman was a huge part of that. So many people that have been involved that are still a lot of guys that are still involved. But the whole town rallied. They were all down at Southern Connecticut that day. They had the fire trucks, drove us through town. I know everybody still does that, but it was just, it was just something that you'll never forget for the rest of your life. And I certainly have it tattooed on my shoulder, Coach. I don't know if you remember that. I did get it tattooed. So,
Right. And Coach, you're always going to be connected with these guys because this was your first undefeated season. The team finished #1 in the state. So there's always going to be that bond with them. And I know a few years back, the Alberella honored that team, and you spoke up and said they'll always be my boys. But how special are both these boys and those entire seniors that played on that team to you?
First of all, the leadership that these fellows portrayed and their classmates, the seniors, they were just phenomenal. They just had, I think, they put in their head early in the year during the summer that they were going to be good, and they just worked and they got ready to play. And as I said before, it was a tremendous team effort. It really was. I mean, two great running backs, a great quarterback. The offensive line was not overly big, but they worked hard. They executed, but the leadership was amazing. And it was one of the hardest years to coach. Johnny mentioned that everybody came after us. I mean, all of a sudden we had a target on our back, and it was a difficult year to coach because there was never there was one thing after the next. And I battled with these two guys on occasions. They were a little rambunctious every now and then. I'll be polite. But to see them grow up to be the young men that they are now with their families and their careers and everything else. Johnny put in my house right here one of the best boilers in the state of Connecticut. Right, John?
Yes, sir.
Still running great. I'll never forget, when after the season was over, you would call up the college coaches to come in and talk to, your seniors, possibility of going to school and everything. So I always had the kids call to the office to talk to the coaches and everything. So we were doing this for a couple of weeks. And one day Johnny comes in my office and says, "Coach, I talked to you." I said, "Yeah." He says, "Coach, I'm not going to college." He said, "I'm going to go work with my dad. And one of these days, you're going to call me to fix your toilet." And I did.
Yeah.
One thing, I'm glad you mentioned this, Coach, and Jay and John, you touched on it too, but Mr. Anroman really was helpful to that program because even after John and David had graduated, he still came back years later and did the captain's practice for the upcoming teams. And I mean, in the summer, when it's summertime and you're going out to the football field at 6 o'clock in the evening, it's not always easy to do, but he always loved Derby football. And, he loved his kids, obviously, but he loved being around Derby football. And that should never go unnoticed either.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Right. Well, guys, I want to thank you both for giving us a few minutes today. It was nice to reminisce. And again, in the fall, I'm going to have you two back on with some of your other teammates and we'll recap that whole 90 season because it was very special. And congratulations on the 35th anniversary. You both deserve it. So congratulations.
You guys are getting old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a little. I can't believe it's been that long, though, really. It seems like just yesterday. Talking about it puts you right back in the huddle again. But wow, I can't believe it's been that long. Well, listen, it was a pleasure coming on, Mike. Thank you, Charlie. Always great to see you. And Palmer, I'll talk to you soon, guys.
You too, guys.
We'll see you.
Thank you, John. And
thanks a lot,
Jay, thank you.
Take care,
Thanks
guys.
a lot.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it, guys. So, Coach, that's got to be a great feeling when you have former players come back and they talk about things that, when we think we remember everything, they remember something that we didn't even think about.
Sure.
And that's really the best feeling. And again, that's what I think you and your fellow coaching staff always wanted to get out of coaching. Sure, you want to win, you want the program to succeed, but you really want these kids to take something out of it when they go on to their adult life. And you could see those are two examples. And Walt, of course, is another example of just, how great these kids have done in their everyday lives.
No, there's no question. I mean, high school sports, that should, it should be co-curricular. It's you're teaching them in class, and then after school, whatever activity it might be, it could be cross country, it could be football, it could be basketball, it doesn't matter, the sport. There are lessons to be learned, and that's why we're really doing it. That's why you're putting in all that time. Yes, there's an intensity. Yes, you want to win, but coaches always say, if you take care of the little things, the big things will take care of themselves. And that's kind of the mentality we had, I was teasing the kids and everything, but I'd make sure they were doing their classwork. I'd make sure they were in the study halls. They weren't scooching off. That's all part of it. I mean, you have to be a responsible person, a good citizen of the school, not just a football player. That's not the way it works. That's not the way it works for us anyway. And I think the kids learned some great lessons coming out of that year. And I think because it was so difficult, yes, we're undefeated and we're state champs and all that stuff, but the lessons that were learned because of the ups and downs of the season, because of the pressure we were under, because of the having a target on your back and everything else, going into that Shelton game, we had, I didn't have the best of luck against Shelton. That was a big game. People don't realize, but for us, that was a big game to finish it up. And these kids just accepted all that we gave them, and they worked together. And always, when I think of this team, the first thing I think of is team. They were just a great group of kids that worked together. They loved each other. They worked. They were very unselfish, and they just put it in their minds that they were going to achieve something great.
Yeah, they definitely did. And I mean, very special team. So, Coach, real quickly, I just wanted to bring this up. One of the things that has always been a big part of high school football is, having the eye in the sky, as I like to call it, and having a couple people up in the booth while, because they could see what's open and things like that. When did that come about, and how instrumental has it been in the success of, especially when you were coaching?
Well, early on, no one used phones. It's a funny story. I'm going to say maybe it was 19. I'm getting mixed up here a little bit. 86. No, had before that. 83, 82 maybe. We were going to play Ridgefield. I don't know how that game came about. Maybe the 10th game that when they started doing that. And I'm sitting there, Mr. Vitello. I'm sitting with Lou, and Mr. Vitello comes in. And he says, Coach, the athletic director from Ridgefield called. They want to know how we're going to set up their phones. So Lou said to them, well, we don't use phones, so tell them no phones, So Mr. Vitello came back about 20 minutes later. He goes, Coach, they really want to use their phones. Lou looks at him and like, tell them to bring their whole goddamn telephone company. But it didn't. I think probably right when I took over, somewhere around there, we never had them with Lou. So it would have to be 84, 85 in that era that the phones came into usage. And ironically, the first couple of times we had like these little walkie-talkies from CBS or something, but until we started to get into the portaphones and all of that, But, getting back to that 90 team, two of the biggest plays or the biggest play of that Ansonia game came from up above, John Oko. I always talk to Oak when we were on offense, and we were throwing a short out. We were running a post and flat, and Oak came back and said, Coach, he said, Child, they didn't cover the post. I said, okay. So a few plays later, we ran it again, but I told Joe Martin, Joe, look to the flat, but throw the post. And that's when the first time he hit Brian. And then ironically, we came back a couple times, a second time in that game, and hit that same play. But that play definitely came from upstairs. John Oko sent it down. But many times, the phones help. I mean, there's no question about it. And now they use iPads and everything else on the sideline. I mean, the technology is way ahead. But no, it was definitely a help. And as you say, there's a different perspective. When you're on the field, you see one view of the game, but when you're up above and you can look down and see the secondary and how they're moving and stuff, it definitely helps. And again, I mean, that's where you have a coaching staff. I had every bit of confidence in Oak and John D up there. If they saw something, I was going to use it. They weren't up there just to watch the game. You know, they're up there doing their job, and they did it very well.
Yeah, and I mean it really like it was really big in Derby doing that. And I mean, you know, I remember when Oak took over, he kind of put you up there. So you
Yeah,
got, you know, you got to see what it's like up there. And I mean, Chris Anderson's always told me that in a perfect world, he would coach all his games up there because he could see everything. But it's really helpful. And you know, it's funny. I remember one game against Amity. I think their headsets weren't working. So you guys couldn't use the telephones that day because you have to, you know,
right.
common courtesy. So it's amazing that like you plan to like have a game plan, have somebody up there, and sometimes your equipment doesn't work. So, you know, but I always felt like that was a big part of Derby's success in the 80s was the eye
Well,
in the sky.
well, it was funny because, as I said, the first couple of years we were really using almost like a kid's walkie-talkie type thing. One of Oak's jobs on game day was to make sure he got 3 new batteries, so we wouldn't run out in the middle of the game, you know. But
Right.
no, and then of course, even with us, it became more and more sophisticated as time went on. You know, where you can speak to different people at different times, and they were voice activated, and you have to press the button and all that stuff. So uh, they became very, very useful.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, Coach, thank you again for doing this. It was a lot of fun. It was nice to reminisce with these guys tonight.
It really
And
was.
you know, we'll have you back on here in a couple weeks. Thanks again for doing it.
All right, Michael. We'll see you, buddy.
Well, there you have it, folks. That's Ground Chuck, Charlie's coaching corner. I'm Mike Kenichi. He's Charlie DeCenzo saying good night, everyone. All right, perfect.